All right, good evening. I'm going to call the Richmond City Council meeting for May 25th, 2021 to order. Madam Clerk, on the minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there can be a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting held on May 10th, adopt the minutes of the special council meeting held on May 17th, and adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting for public hearings held on May 17th.
All right.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discrepancies or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions or deletions?
None, Your Worship.
All right. We have a motion to resolve into committee of the whole to hear delegations on items on the agenda.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. We have one such agenda delegation. Andy Hobbs wants to delegate on number 19, the traffic intersection cameras. So, Mr. Hobbs. Yeah, go ahead. And introduce yourself, and you've got 5 minutes.
Your Worship, through the chair, I'm Andy Hobbs. I live in Richmond, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I will just speak to the resolution briefly before you tonight, and I'm speaking in favor of the resolution to write to the Solicitor General regarding traffic cameras. A little background for me, I've been involved in a number of projects with cameras in Vancouver, license plate readers, cameras used for special events where large crowds are held. And just a little bit of background on the cameras themselves. I mean, people might not realize they started way back in 1942, CCTV, and commercially they came into practice in 1949. So in 1968, there was an application for them used in New York in the city of Olean, and that was used for a crime reduction program. So in the 70s, as we all know, VCRs made cameras even more popular, and they began to show up in banks and stores and places like that. Now, a big issue with the cameras, justifiably so, is privacy concerns. So the Supreme Court and other courts, but the Supreme Court of Canada has weighed in on that issue several times. And while the right to privacy in public places isn't absolute, it is still a consideration for the court, and the court has said that citizens do have some expectation of privacy even in public places. But it's not a all win, all lose type of situation. Many factors come into play for the court, like the location of the camera, the purpose for the observation in the first place, and I think really importantly, the rules and regulations that are in place at whatever level that guide the use, retention, and distribution of anything in the cameras. Just looking at the numbers, so 110 cameras for Richmond, if they were going 24/7, I think it would work out to about 2,640 hours a day. And if you did it per year, it would come in at just under 1 million hours. So even your most dedicated Netflix binger couldn't watch that many hours. So the idea that the police would be sitting there watching video trying to pick people out for whatever reason is just not practical, considering an FTE works 2,080 hours a year. So I think a key factor in considering this is, and that's down the road after you have discussions, is the control and access to the video itself. And it wouldn't be a good idea to have it controlled by the police or possessed by the police. The city should be in possession of it. The police should have a process, or any other authority, bylaws or some other authority, should have a process for making requests to access the video, much like is done with the Canada Line through transit. That would be based on reasonable grounds where an offense, for instance, has taken place. There would be a date or a span of dates. There would be a time frame. There would probably be a suspect description or a vehicle description that the police or somebody else was actually looking for. So you'd also have to have an exception for exigent circumstances. If it was like a kidnapping and there was a child abducted and it was in the middle of an Amber Alert, then there would have to be a shorter process for emergencies. But I think the public expectation for the city and for government overall would be that cameras could be used to help solve serious incidents. Murders, obviously, terrorism, But even things like road rage, hate crimes, and of course, something like a kidnapping or the call we had at the airport a couple of weeks ago. So there are other key issues that you'd have to address. Retention of the video would be one. You don't keep these things forever. The digital video, that is, you don't keep it forever. There's retention schedules. It might be 6 months. It might be a year. It might be 2 years. But you don't keep it forever. So that would be part of the process as well. But the reason I'm in favor of this resolution is because it simply initiates a discussion with the sole gen. And you don't know where that discussion will lead. Other really good points and information will be brought up by people with different points of view on this issue. And I think it's a really good conversation to have, because I think protection of the public is important, and the public would expect, under proper circumstances with proper regulations and proper guidelines, that the police would be able to access that information to help solve a homicide, an assault, or whatever the case may be. I think the public would expect the cameras were of the proper quality and resolution that they could aid in that investigation. So I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good idea to have that discussion, and thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. We've got a question from Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming forward. I think it's good that somebody of your caliber was able to come forward and give us a bit of an outline. This request is not new. I'm not sure if you're aware, but from the city when we voted on this a number of years ago. I have three questions, Your Worship, and the one that I think you touched on it, Mr. Hobbs, to start with, and that was the idea not of privacy, but you were involved with license plate readers, etc. In Vancouver. Were the Vancouver Police Department privy to utilize the material that came from the cameras that were throughout the city?
The traffic cameras? The traffic cameras? No, those were controlled by the city.
Okay, but did the Vancouver Police have the opportunity to use them for any incidences that they had?
Well, if you had an incident and there was a traffic camera, what you would do is get a warrant, and you'd get judicial authorization to seize that. The license plate readers are a different form of technology, and quite frankly, they're probably pretty old and outdated by now. But those were a provincial policing program that were used throughout different policing jurisdictions, and they had a specific function to look for vehicles associated to crime, people wanted. So that was a specific purpose, that program.
Well, thank you for that. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if one of our safety groups within the other Metro Vancouver, the province of British Columbia, they had the opportunity to use it, we need a strong case going forward to the Solicitor General. Obviously, we need these cameras now more than ever, and so does every other community. So I'm just wondering if there was already an example like the Vancouver Police Department having opportunity to use them, then where was the privacy factor there? And that would be my question to you, Mr. Hobbs, in terms of the privacy factor. Was that ever considered by the police department in your experience there?
Yes, it has been considered, and I mean, there are lots of examples across Canada. Toronto has quite an extensive camera system. I think the privacy issues are always a significant issue for people, and that's justifiably so. I think one important point to make is that the cameras we're talking about aren't hooked up to facial recognition. So that's a different thing that sometimes people read about, where you have facial recognition programs running contemporaneously with the cameras and people are being picked out of crowds. That's not the case here. What we're talking about is digital video that's being stored, and it can be accessed if there's reasonable and probable grounds, and you get either a judicial authorization or you have a regulation and policy from the city, much like TransLink has, where the police can access it. So the facial recognition thing is a whole other level, and I'm not talking about that.
Did the Vancouver Police Department get any pushback at any time from the Solicitor General in terms of privacy?
Oh, I don't know about the Solicitor General, but I mean, there's all pushback. There's always concerns because there's different community groups that have different perspectives on that, and lots of those concerns are legitimate. And the Supreme Court has weighed in on it several times. So I think what's important is that you have these discussions and then you see what the balance is. Balancing privacy rights, because the public does have some expectation of that, even in public, and balancing the need to protect the public, especially if an incident happens and the police go, hey, this happened on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. They fled down number 3 road from Westminster Highway northbound in a silver Chrysler minivan. Well, in that specific kind of instance, you want to be able to see the license plate. You want to be able to see the description of the person driving the car with the abducted child in the back. So I think the public would expect that and tolerate that degree of loss of privacy if it meant solving serious crimes like that. And it's not like somebody is sitting around watching the video monitor all day. You're talking 1 million hours of video a year based off 110 cameras working 24 hours a day. Like I said, nobody can watch that much video, right? So that's just not going to happen.
My last question to you as an officer, and obviously been involved in traffic in Vancouver and what have you, the dash camera. Please keep asking people when there are incidents if you have a dash camera footage, etc., and make it available. What's the difference between that and the cameras that we're trying to employ?
Well, I think everybody realizes that there's cameras everywhere in society, almost every store, every bank, every person has a cell phone, so many things are videoed and people are free to do that in public. I think the difference is for people who are concerned about privacy is that those things are operated by individuals. So it always takes it to a different level when the government, whether it's city, provincial, or federal, are the ones controlling the data. So I think that's a legitimate concern by people because individuals with dash cams don't have the reach and the power and the authority of any government. So I think that's a legitimate distinction that people would make.
Okay. Thank you very much. We can use that information in our discussion later. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Councillor Wolf. Michael?
Thank you, through your worship, to the delegate. My question is,
You've gone mute for some reason, Michael. No, you're still mute. Can we help him out there? It shows here that you're not muted, but we're not hearing anything. Anything?
Could be with his device.
Michael, you're still muted. Is your laptop or whatever you've got, has it been muted? Not the program, but the laptop. Okay.
Maybe he has to.
And I see, I've got a note from Alexa saying I can hear him. We can all hear him. Can you hear him? No, we can't hear him here. Just hold on, just give us a sec. So just a minute.
Is it the? It's on there.
Radio Free City Hall, yeah, right.
Shall we just let,
Just give us a minute to work this out.
and then the mayor and Councillor Al can just use their devices?
So what are you gonna do?
So we'll be having to use your devices, so we'll turn the sound on your laptop, and between you and Councillor Al, you'll just have to turn off and on. when you're speaking, so we'll be using your laptop sound versus the council chamber sound that doesn't seem to be working.
Sorry? What did you say?
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Appuyez sur le 0. Pour choisir français,
Goodbye.
While we're waiting for Councillor Wolf, can someone else go off mute so we can hear you? See if we can hear you.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
appuyez sur le 0. Pour choisir français,
You entered 33. This meeting ID does not exist. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
So there's something wrong with the.
All right, so turn off your stuff.
That's right, so you can, use.
Can we do it now?
Yes. Yeah. So when you're speaking, you'll have to be, or when you're not speaking, Councillor, you have to be muted, and then you'll.
All right, so I go off mute. I go off mute?
Yes.
Okay. Just hang on a sec. Can you hear me? Can you hear? Okay. Just, okay, just to let you know what we're doing. Are you having a good time, Grant? What we've done is we've turned off the system here in council chambers. And so Councillor Howe and I and the clerks are just using our laptops, and hopefully that'll work. Okay, so sorry about that, Councillor Wolf. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship to the delegate, just one question. If this item goes ahead, it seems it's a challenge of the ruling made by the Privacy Commissioner. So my question is, what is the value of having the Office of the Information and Privacy Commission for BC if cities are to challenge rulings on a regular basis or a one-off basis? Does it still hold value as the agency that it was set up as?
Mr. Hobbs, if you can answer that if you want. I think it's actually quite beside the point, but you can go ahead if you wish.
Sure, I'll try to venture an answer through the chair, Councillor Wolf. I think the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, dealing with freedom of information and privacy, is very important, and it fulfills a very important role in BC. So I think the idea of just bringing this question up with the Solicitor General so there can be a discussion gives everybody the chance to have sober second thought about the rationale for why the cameras are set up how they are. And even the Privacy Commissioner, is somebody who would give it a second thought. So I don't think it's confrontational. I think it's good to have these discussions, and ultimately a decision will be made by the provincial government to pursue it or not, and the Privacy Commissioner will have the opportunity to review it. So I think it's worth having the discussion, and it's a very important office, so I don't think it undermines it at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with that, thank you, Mr. Hobbs, and may I have a motion to rise and report? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Brings us to the consent agenda. We've got the receipt of the committee minutes. We've got a couple of contracts. One is for the supply and delivery of Microsoft licensing. Then we have the Oracle RAC Enterprise and Solaris Spark server upgrades. An application for a new primary liquor license for the Zodiac Karaoke and Pub on Alexandra. The Richmond Hospital Acute Care Tower Replacement Project. The Cycling Network Plan Update, the proposed Phase 1 engagement. TransLink 2021 cost share programs, the supplemental application, sidewalk width standards for major and minor arterial roads, multifamily water meter program and water conservation initiatives update. Then we have a land use application, which will go to public hearing June 21st. 10-340, 60, 80, 10-400, 420, number 4 road, rezoning from RS1E to RTM2. Then we have a housekeeping request for the abandonment of unadopted bylaws. And finally, the UBCM grant application for local government development approvals program. May I have a motion to adopt those by general consent? Moved and seconded. Councillor, we'll go to discussion. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting all the items on the consent agenda and just want to speak to 3 tonight. Number 10, the Richmond Hospital Acute Care Tower Replacement Project. And firstly, I just wanted to congratulate the Richmond Hospital Foundation for reaching its Act Now capital campaign goal of $50 million. And I think that's just absolutely outstanding that our community could raise $50 million over 4 years. And it's, I think because of that, when I heard about it, and Councillor Liu and I talked about it, and you know, this really shows how deeply our community believes in healthcare in Richmond. And I'm sure, like the rest of members of council, you know, I receive a lot of questions about this project. When will it be ready? And I think the community would just feel a bit more comfortable if they had more information. And this is a huge project, and I know that it's one of many projects that the province is looking at, and that's part of the extra information that was in your package. So I know these things take time, but our community has done so much work, and I think there is a sense of urgency in our community, and I think people just want to know that the business case is approved, the funding is in place, and that they're going to start procurement. So I'm happy that we will be writing and that we will be meeting with our MLAs in the near future. Number 11, the Cycling Network Plan Update, proposed Phase 1 engagement. The update will ensure that the city's cycling network and policies are reflective of the community's current needs and continue to support the city's long-term mobility objectives and reflect best practices with respect to cycling facility planning and design. And the report identifies that students in grades 6 to 9 will be targeted to take the survey, but I was happy to learn at committee that the survey will be made available to students in all grades. Now, I did have a question, Your Worship, through you to staff. You know, on our Council 128, under the heading Phase 1 Engagement, paragraph starting with support of the Richmond School District. So we talk about the Richmond School District, but there are several independent schools and post-secondary schools in Richmond. Is there a way that we can engage with them as well?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail, absolutely. We can extend these surveys to those schools as well.
I think that's great. Thanks very much. And I think at committee we discussed that the survey will be able to capture the changes in cycling trends during the pandemic, which I think is really important to look at. I've seen a lot more people out cycling for sure. And I think it's really great that the public engagement activities will start in June, which is Bike Month. And number 12, the TransLink 2021 Cost Share Program Supplemental Application. The bike route improvement project proposed for submission by staff to TransLink's BIC's Recovery Cost Share Program for 2021 is the installation of delineators along both sides of Granville Avenue between Garden City Road and Railway, and that's approximately 3.4 kilometers. Now, when I ride my bike to City Hall, I use the Railway Greenway and then go on to Granville Road along to City Hall. And it can be a bit scary, especially if you're riding beside a bus or there's other cyclists, and quite often there are other cyclists and quite heavy traffic, especially Granville heading towards the city center. So I'm really happy to hear about this project. And this project also supports a number of goals. The city plans and strategies, including the official community plan, the community energy and emissions plan, and the community wellness strategy. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. Councillor Wolf. Am I muted or something? Yes. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it muted just before you said my name. So my items here, I just have I think 3 or 4 of them to speak briefly to. I think I'm in support of all the items on the consent agenda, but there's one that I've been wavering about, so I do have a question about that one. So I'll start with that. When I attended the special planning committee meeting last week, May 19th, there was discussion about, and this is in the minutes, item number 6, so the receipt of committee minutes. In there was discussion about trees that we recommend or are suitable, max number of trees, and there was some discussion by members who are on committee about a hedge bylaw, or the need for inclusion of hedges in tree protection bylaw would maybe be the more accurate way it was discussed. There is not a lot of examples to go on for hedge bylaws. Some cities use it as a part of the fence bylaw. Anyhow, to connect it to item number 15, which I did have some concern on. So it was the development on number 4 road. And so there's 16 trees being removed. A couple on site are being relocated. And another benefit of this development is that there's going to be a retained hedge. But if you look at the pictures of the site that the staff have for us on page, sorry, I just lost the page. Anyway, on the report, it talks on page 158 about the trees. And sorry, I'm just scrambling now to get the page. I thought I had it. Oh, there it is. Page 186. Actually, 187 is better. Yeah, 187 is better. And it shows at the very bottom of that page a western red cedar hedge. Trees H1 to H7 is to be retained. I think that was a real positive of this aspect, or of this proposal. But you can see just north of it, there's a larger hedge not being retained. Now, albeit staff might have looked at the health of that and seen that that's not as healthy as the lower one, or that it could be moved. So my question is to staff, are we able to revisit the tree protection bylaw for private property, which we just approved, but to have a look at it where we can include language for hedge retention, hedge relocation? I think it would assist staff in dealing with future cases like this, because right now we're saving 7 of the hedge trees, but we're losing 24 of them. And those 24 are not counted in the 16 trees already marked as being removed. So can staff comment on that?
Councillor Wolf, that's an appropriate question for a committee, where that's what you have to decide based on what you see in the various reports and what's going on here. What you could be doing under other circumstances, by all means, bring it up at a committee.
Great, yeah, and again, that's why I attend all the committee meetings, even though I'm not a member, and I didn't feel at the time I could jump in and make a motion, which I can't do because I'm not a member of the committee. Anyway, I will be hesitant as I support the full consent agenda with item 15, because I think with the proper language, and maybe a member of the planning will bring that up, although it's been brought up in discussion enough times, I think, already to warrant that action. Further along, I just have 2 other items I'd like to speak briefly to. Actually, make that 3 brief items. First off, the cycling network, number 11. I know staff are aware that Bike to Work Week, or Bike to School Week is coming up next week, and June is Bike to Bike Month. And I just ensure they do their typical best at getting to all the major bike routes, so that people who are trying this for the first time get a positive experience. And I know at Public Works they were cognizant of that. Item number 13, the sidewalks. When I brought this up at Public Works, the width, there was no one at that meeting who was able to answer it, and I thought there was a memo coming before this item today. The issue with it is many residents have expressed at some of the sidewalks, brand new sidewalks put in along Westminster Highway, and they end with this box, this wire box of rocks that's higher than the curb, and it's a tripping hazard. It's sharp. I'm not sure if anyone from staff are able to just briefly provide, because if that's the standard, then actually I'd probably object to this tonight.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, staff went out and reviewed the spot that you're talking about. That's not a finished product at this point in time. That is still under construction. There should have been construction cones on it, and I understand at this point that's been remedied for the time being.
Terrific. I appreciate the quick response on that, getting staff out to check. My final item on the consent agenda, very briefly, item number 14, I think that's very positive to move the water metering program to multifamily. Hearing from staff at Public Works where the old system, it would take 4 to 5 months to delay between when there was a leak to when there was city action. And the new fixed base meters, they get readings every 15 minutes in increments of 15 minutes. So the action response from our city for multifamily properties, which use a whole lot more water than single family, I think it's a great time we're making that move now. So with that, I'll support the items on the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting everything on the agenda. Just like to make a few comments on a couple of items. Obviously, they're all important, but the hospital acute care tower replacement project and trying to get information from the Premier and the Minister of Health and the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board is critical to this community. And I too would like to say thank you to the leadership over the number of years actually that the board and the foundation have done within our community. Councillor McPhail hit it right on the nose, saying it shows what our community can do. And a huge thanks has to go out to all the donors, no matter how big or how small, to put together $50 million and growing. There's not a time to stop. There's obviously opportunity to continue on. And what a magnificent story that this is shown. It actually reflects, Your Worship, in the same commitment as we saw in the community when the first hospital came along and the community got behind the hospital. And now we're looking for the second time. So I think it's going to be important, a tremendous need in the community. And to be looking to see that we get a timeline from them as well. And hopefully that those goals and objectives can be met. So kudos all around there. Just a quick question on the cycling network. We're going to try to gather the perspectives from what have you and look to project routes. Are we going to look at arterial roads? And are we going to look at arterial roads in terms of getting perspective? In that it's great to just talk about the city center, but we've got to get to the city center if we're going to cycle. And if you're living in Steveston or South Richmond or North Richmond or Auckland, to get in there, are we going to try to find out? And are we also going to look at speeds of cars on those arterial roads where there's possible cycling?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, the overall cycling plan will look at all of the gaps within the city, both on arterial roads and not. And in particular, it'll look at protection of cyclists on arterial roads or any new bike routes that we plan to put or any old ones that we plan to upgrade in those areas. I'm sorry, I can't remember what your second question was.
No, are we going to look at maybe the speed on where we may have cycling? I know we're going to have barriers, but what about the speed of cars?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, we weren't planning to look at the speed limit on the arterial roads, but we are planning to look at better protection for cyclists along the arterial roads.
Okay, thank you. That's both are important. Thank you. Keep up the good work. The other thing is, Your Worship, looking at the sidewalk widths, etc. Are we going to consult with the Committee on Disability? When we talk about sidewalk, I look at wheelchairs and walkers and people walking on them, and possibly, sometimes you get cyclists and skateboarders on them as well. So I guess I'm looking at it from a safety point of view. Will we consult on them when we in various areas which could be frequent by people, especially in the downtown area where there are many seniors?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, yes, we will discuss the wider sidewalks with the Richmond Center for Disabilities. In general, they do like and support wider sidewalks, so I think that they'll like this standard.
Good, good. I think that very progressive, and we're a leader in it, and they're the leader actually in coming up with guidelines and universal guidelines. The other item, Your Worship, is the, and I'll be supporting it as I did when we brought the water meter program in, is to look at the multi-family dwellings. And I guess I like the report. It's a great report of where we're going with it. Have we had any requests from any existing multifamily dwellings that might like to try to convert? Has anybody really tried to do that and has been an example for us to follow?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, yes, the volunteer program has been offered since 2010, and we have, I believe, over 150-ish complexes that have volunteered under that program.
Are we getting that out to maybe some of them that don't? Because I've heard, and as all of us probably have, from many residents in those dwellings saying, I wish we had a water meter program to get their stratas to think on that to see if they can actually do that. And I've just wondered, you've got examples, whether some of them know that that expertise may be available to them to convert.
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, yes, certainly over the years we have increased our efforts for outreach. We've been contacting property managers directly, presenting to strata councils, as well as holding info sessions and open houses.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and I'll be supporting everything, Your Worship. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thank you. I support all the items on the consent agenda. I do have a couple of comments on items 11, 12, and 13, and they sort of tie together. My comments on the cycling network plan, there's a survey that asked a lot of questions of why you're afraid to ride your bike. I'm afraid to ride my bike along roads that have parked cars. And I guess what I'd like to see is parking banned on all arterial roads so that people would feel more comfortable riding the bike along the roads. Years ago, I saw somebody whacked by a car door opening on Railway Avenue where we had a bike lane between the cars, parked cars, and the mobile cars. The person didn't get hit by the door, but he fell off his bike right into the traffic lane. I was able to stop, and fortunately, there was nobody. He didn't get all the way across the road for the oncoming cars. But after that, I just said, "That's it. I'm never going to ride my bike again until the cars are gone." And I think it's important. I think there's questions about why you don't want to ride your bike, but I didn't see that on the list as one of them. In terms of so what I'd like to see us banning parking along Railway Avenue, number 1 road, and all the arterials. It's time that people started taking bikes in public transit, and we shouldn't be providing parking for the cars. We should be providing access for people in alternate modes of transportation. The second thing I wanted to comment about was, let's see, where's my notes here? TransLink, I think the Railway Avenue corridor, I think that's a great program. But again, we have 1 or 2 spots. We've got a pub that has parking on Railway, and there's a few problems along Railway. I'm not sure what we're going to do about it. I'd certainly like to see Railway totally clear for bikes. In terms of the sidewalks, having wider sidewalks along arterial roads is great, but how about continuing those arterial roads? Stevenson Highway, the arterial part ends at number 1 road, and yet the people walking are heading for the dike along number 1 road. Now, I contacted staff earlier this year, and they actually widened the sidewalk by filling in the area between the concrete and the curb with blacktop for people walking. But that's probably the most important part of it, and as I see, if it's just dealing with arterials, the areas where people are walking to they may use the arterials to get there, but most people walking are along the end of Stevenson Highway, the end of 7th Avenue, and places like that. So they've got a problem along those areas of people park their cars because you can't walk on the street. They've got hedges along the roads that are a problem. And which brings me to the other question about hedges. It seems to me we should have a
Richmond City Council actually did send 3 letters to the provincial government asking for their help to implement the replacement project. And, you know, we see that promise has been made, but so far we are still waiting for the final approval of the project. Now, I just want to ask staff a question because we received additional information saying that on page, let me see, 117. So we know that right now the Richmond Hospital redevelopment is classified as under planning, not yet approved. So it's different from other kinds of projects, which is under procurement or active procurement. So I just want to ask staff, what does that mean? Can anyone answer the question?
Reflect on that?
Basically, I want to ask how far away are we from the actual implementation? When it's still under planning, could it be changed or further delayed?
All right, turn it off for a sec. Let me make a remark. Okay, that's something we're going to have to talk to Adrian Dix, the Minister of Health, about.
Yes, okay.
We can speculate, but nothing more.
Okay, so just want to make sure that we would have this project in time. And my second comment is on item number 13, this sidewalk width standards. I agree with staff that this is only a modest change. It's not going to have too much negative impact whatsoever. Because we are already doing this in the city center, in the Stevenson Village, and also the neighborhood centers. So this is only applying to the other major and minor arterial roads. And this is also going to support the city's goal, which is to have 18% of the trips by walking in 2030, which is much better than the original plan, which is by 2041. So we are really advancing faster. And I also noticed that staff regard this as one of the strategies for traffic management, traffic demand management. So I think this is going to encourage more walking. This is good for the traffic management. It's good for the health of citizens. So I think this is very doable. And the last item is on item 14, multi-family water metering program. I'm proud of our citizens in Richmond for the success of the water metering program since 2003. I noticed that the water conservation since then has been significant. While we have population growth by 25%, the actual consumption of water has dropped by 12%. I think this is a significant achievement that all Richmond citizens can be proud of. And of course, naturally, we extend this to multifamily units. However, staff also mentioned that the volunteer program, which has been in place since 2010, has not achieved much progress. And at the current rate, it will take 175 years to have the full implementation. So I think it's the right thing to do, to look for options to encourage or to implement the water metering programs in multifamily units. I just want to ask staff, from their observation and experience in the past, what are the major obstacles? Is it cost? Is it technical issues? So what are some of the obstacles that we may have to address?
Through your worship to Council, I'd say it's a combination of with cost probably being the main challenge here.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to the options that staff will provide. Thank you.
Right, turn it off, okay? Okay, let's see now. We've got Councillor Day. Carol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting everything on the consent agenda. Item number 9 is a new primary liquor license on Alexander Road for a karaoke facility. I was a little bit concerned about this because in their previous location, they did have a few complaints, and the RCMP and bylaw officers were involved because they allowed people to be smoking inside. But I understand that that problem has been rectified and that this record will go with them to the new location. So should they have the same problems, they don't start from scratch. They take their record with them. So I'm really pleased that Bylaws has stayed on top of this, and I'm glad that we're going to make sure that it's done right when they finally do open. Item number 10, as has been talked about by everybody else, is the hospital acute care tower. I think it's always excellent to remind our MLAs, especially all the new ones, that we are anxiously waiting for the announcement. Having said that, Henry Horgan and Minister Dix did announce the expanded scope of the project to include an MIR unit and a new emergency department. Had they not decided to increase the scope of the project, I think we would have been further along. And I couldn't help but notice as I was reading from the Richmond Hospital Foundation, and congratulations on raising that $50 million goal. But the project has already the business plan has been approved by the Vancouver Coast Health Authority, and now we're waiting for the Treasury Board to approve the plan. And the business plan was only just approved in November, so it hasn't been that long. I still think it's good to write the letter, but I also think we need to give credit where credit is due. It's amazing that we're going to get a new emergency department, a new MRI department, and I hope that when we write the letter to the provincial government and the Minister of Health, that we thank them for the work that they've done already. Always helps to encourage people with positive feedback. Item number 11 is the cycling network. This is the beginning of a engagement process with the public to find out how we can increase cycling. And I was really pleased to read that our goal is to go from 1% cycling in 2008 to 10% in 2041. So we're making progress, and having family that all comes from Denmark, you can imagine how important cycling is for me. I've seen it firsthand, how it can do an incredible job of reducing the cars on the road. Item number 14 is the family water meter program. I was worried when I first got my water meter kind of forced on me. I was worried my costs would go up, and those turned out to be unfounded worries. In fact, my water costs went down because I wasn't using as much energy, as much water as the average single-family home. So I'm pleased to see that it's going to be going into multifamily units, and I think it's going to be good for encouraging good behavior. Next is number 15. This is a redevelopment of number 4 Road to create a bunch of townhouses. And what's interesting on this one is there is a variance to allow for a sidewalk and off-street biking. And I look forward to, as other developments come along the same stretch, that we can expand on that off-street cycling and make it safe to ride your bike on the street, as Councillor Steves pointed out. The last thing I just want to mention was item 17 is the UBCM grant application, and this is to upgrade our computer system. It's called Amanda, which is I won't go into it. It's to improve the planning and permitting process, and it's actually amazing. What will happen is people will be able to track their application for a development permit panel or whatever it's going to be as it moves along. And then it'll improve the process. It'll make it easier for homeowners and builders to track their projects. And in the end, we'll save everybody time and money. So I'm pleased that we're getting that. Thank you very much. Through the chair.
Okay. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I too will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda. Just to echo all of my colleagues, I'm really happy that the Hospital Foundation and all the generous donors of Richmond have reached their goal of $50 million towards the new hospital. And in September, we were promised a new hospital, and the people of Richmond do deserve to have a timeline and to see the business plan and funding in place. And so, while yes, everything takes time, I think we certainly want to know where the timeline is, when it's going to happen, what's going to happen. So it's easy to say it's going to happen. Let's be able to find out when and be able to follow that along so we can all be on the journey together. Number 11, the cycling network plan update. So the proposed phase 1 engagement will be on Let's Talk Richmond. And so a question to staff, approximately when will this consultation be available on Let's Talk Richmond?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, it'll be available on June 1st.
Okay, excellent. I think we've seen a lot of uptake in all the cycling, and I think it's important for us to really understand how people are riding and when they're riding their bikes and where they prefer to ride and what would make them bike more. I know I've been spending a lot of time on my bike with my family and alone, so biking on a road bike, biking on kids' bikes, different modes, and being in different areas and seeing all the improvements that we have made over the years, but seeing the opportunities for more improvements. I know our railway greenway is, I think what was the report we had at one point, 300% up increase in the amount of cyclists over the previous year, over pre-COVID year. So I think we're seeing lots of cyclists out there, and it's important to know what else they need and what else is going to happen. And whether or not we're going to even need to widen that thing, because I think we're seeing a lot of activity on it. If you've been to the Arbutus one in Vancouver, you know that one's probably about due to get widened because it is busy, especially on a sunny weekend. I think the people I'd really love to hear from are people who are riding with kids, and especially if you're with a chariot. I know I've spent many years pulling a double chariot around this town, and especially going into some of the neighborhoods from an arterial road through some of those pathways. There's those bollards and those little chicanes. You can't necessarily get your chariot through there with your bike. So I'd also like to see us looking at new standards for connecting those paths of how we set up those chicanes and maybe get staff to drive a double chariot through there, a few of those places, and see how that's going to work. Because I think we can create something better so that, you know, people can get home after they've gone for a ride with their kids and taken their kids out. And next is the number 12, the TransLink cost share program. So I know we're going to be connecting Garden City to Railway along Granville Avenue with the Delineators. Well, it just so happens that we have a bike park at Garden City, and we're going to have a new pump track over at Railway there. So I think that this, it's going to have the normal commuters, but I think this really creates an opportunity for kids as they advance their cycling skills to go between the two different sites and try different things. And so I'm just wondering from staff, when are we planning to open? When's our grand opening of our railway pump track?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, I don't have the exact date, although we are very close to being able to open, and certainly people are exploring around the area right now, but certainly we'll advise council as soon as we can, and we'll have an opening opportunity in line with whatever provincial health order is in place at that time.
Awesome. We're really looking forward to it. Thank you. Appreciate that. And finally, number 14 for the water metering program. So we all, just to confirm with staff, we already have voluntary water metering for multifamily. This is looking to make it mandatory, right? So we get all of the multifamily stratas on board on the water metering program. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, that's correct.
Okay. And so what is the support right now as the incentive right now for to get the multifamilies to sign on? It's like a certain amount per unit to a maximum or something.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, yes, the current subsidy is at the greater of either $100,000 per complex or $1,200 per unit, whichever ends up being greater.
Okay, so right now it's still a good time for stratas to sign on, to look at it, to have their talks, go through their AGMs, do whatever they need to do to get ahead of this before it becomes mandatory and potentially even lose that. Or would that be even on the floor?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, that's correct. It's an opportunity now for those complexes to sign on for it and volunteer. Most of the complexes that have yet to sign on are fully covered under the subsidy, so it will be free of charge to those strata complexes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All right. With that, we're going to call the question on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. There's two items that have been taken off the consent agenda. The first one is number 18, which is 8511 number 6 road, a soil fill application. And it reads that the soil used for the placement of fill applications submitted by Bohan Jiang, proposing to deposit soil on the property located at 8511 number 6 road for the purpose of remediating the property to develop a blueberry farm, be authorized for referral to the ALC, and for the ALC to review and determine the merits of the proposal from the agricultural perspective, as the applicant has satisfied all of the city's current reporting requirements, and I would so move. Okay, so that's moved and that is seconded. Just so the public knows kind of in very summary form what we're talking about here. There's this property on number 6 road, and there was on a substantial portion of the property 38 years ago, there was some damage to it, which included excavating and removing the native soil and replacing the soil with untreated wood waste. Now, what they want to do is deposit 30,000 cubic meters of soil over about 2.5 hectares of the 4.05 hectare property with an average depth of about 1 meter. And that would bring the property to the same elevation as the neighboring properties. The matter was referred back, and staff and the consultants took a very long look at looking at additional sources of soil as proposed by the applicants, whether it is prudent to impose geographic restrictions in terms of the source of soils for the soil or just the topsoil, and that staff examine the wisdom of the soil tracker application and report back. And I believe in summary what the consultant and staff are saying is that it would be appropriate to go with the original application as it was stated, and there are very long explanations for those additional items, but it seems appropriate to go ahead. So we will go to Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be speaking in opposition to this item, as I did at General Purposes Committee, with a few new findings that I've made, and we'll see where that goes if there's further discussion. So I really do feel strongly that it is, sort of the speaker might have been covered there, I feel that it very strongly that the city should have a role in imposing geographic restrictions. If we are to support this going to the ALC, it's not in their jurisdiction to do that, and historically they do not say that you have to get it from the local area. So basically, we're taking our hands off that pressure, which I feel there's many councillors and reasons for that. I think there's a lot of benefits where we're a very unique soil type. What the current property owners throughout Richmond do, the future property owners of Richmond will have to deal with. And this is an exact case of what the previous owner did, something incorrect, and the current property owner got a surprise and has to figure out a way to deal with it. And it can be very costly. I think what we do, instead of covering up waste and leave it for future generations, we find ways to amend that wood waste, which I have been informed is not toxic, is not illegal. It's just wasn't disclosed and was not done in guidance of city permitting processes. So I think there's definitely a reason why we should impose geographic restrictions. That's like as I've said. I know we've just recently approved the soil deposition bylaw for any type of removal or depositing, and that it has no maximum. I think I calculated it right, that this property would not actually take it to the maximum, but pretty close. So we put a cap of $200,000. This one I figure would be about $120,000 in cap. So thinking of the scale of it, as I share a few more pieces of information here, they're looking at bringing in about 25,000 cubic meters. If I equate that to how much a typical dump truck carries, anywhere from 7.6 cubic meters up to 10, we're looking at about 3,000 dump truck loads going along number 6 road. And if you know of other areas in East Richmond, when there's one large truck with an extra load, to go on a narrow road like that with ditches on both sides and back up, it takes some time and skill by those drivers. But it does back up a lot of traffic, and can lead to, there's a couple S-curves on 6 Road, can lead to some surprise slamming on the brakes and ending up in ditches kind of thing. So I'm concerned about the size and scale of this project. And then the final point that I didn't bring up in committee is just looking at the potential for this with the agricultural lens on it. So yes, we're going to see a plan here that calls for blueberries. It's going to be very costly. It's going to take years to complete. And it's for blueberries, not for the typical things we put on our plates or help to sustain a life. It's blueberries. And there's blueberries grown nearby. If you just look at the property to the south of this one, it's 4 times the size of the one in question here. And they're able to make a go of it, growing blueberries, albeit I don't know what's underneath their blueberries, if there's wood waste or not. But the other thing is that property to the south, comparing it to the one that's in question here, the difference in value is $6 million from the assessment cost because of this monster house that was placed on the property in question. So how will a future farmer make it with a future blueberry farm that this might produce, but then have to afford the $2+ million house that comes along with being the farmer of this property? I think this is an example of some past things that have slipped through the cracks, and I think it's time that those accountable, or those who have the funding to do it, can repair some of the past wrongs that were overlooked. So that's why I'll be in opposition to this item tonight. Thank you very much.
Councillor Steeves. Harold, you're muted.
Yeah, I have some of the same concerns as Councillor Wolf. However, I will be supporting it and sending it to the Land Commission. My concerns are a report that's forthcoming to Council that staff are working on right now to raise agricultural lands by a meter or a meter and a half as the sea level rises, in order to keep the farmland above the saltwater wedge in the river. And I think we're going to have to come to grips with exactly what we're going to rebuild our soils with. So in the short term, while this one isn't perfect, it's better than some of the plans that we've had in the past. I agree with Councillor Wolf in terms of the wood waste or hog fuel. Years ago, we put hog fuel in part of our field. We had horses, and it must have been a foot deep or so. You can't tell where it was now. Wood waste just rots just the same as any other vegetation. It just takes 10 years to do it. And while it's rotting away, the soil becomes very acidic and low in nitrogen. But after it rots away, it's perfectly good humus and good for organic gardening. So there's nothing wrong with wood waste. And the best thing would be to mix it in with the soil that's coming in, and they'd have some really good soil once it had rotted away. But they're going to cover it, and it'll just take a little bit longer for it to decay. Now, there's one other argument in favor of covering it, because when wood waste or any organic material decays, it gives off CO2, and by covering it, you're capping it. But it's either CO2 or it could be plant food as it decays, and plants would actually incorporate back into the soil. So there are a lot of arguments there I'm going over, and on the pros and cons. In this case, I think we leave it up to the Land Commission to decide what to do. But what we've got to look at is where we're going to get really good soil to build up Richmond's topsoil in over the next 50 years or so, if we do it. There may be other aspects of keeping the salt from ruining our farmland, and we have to look at that too. But we've got a referral before Council, and this is about the second or third or fourth time I've given it, to look at mixing our own topsoil at the adjacent to the soil place where the bike the bike track was. And before that, I did a referral years ago to mix topsoil along the dike east of Steveston Highway, along the dike up there, northeast of Triangle Road. We're going to be looking, for example, at dredging Steveston Harbor and dredging Scotch Pond. And we had those soils analyzed years ago, and they're Class 1 agricultural soils. So we should be looking at some new ideas of where we get our soil from, because we may have to build up Richmond soils a lot more in the future. The one aspect I do like of this, the report the consultants came up with, is we have constantly said that we want alluvial soils just like Richmond and Delta. So they found a few pockets in Vancouver close to the river and Burnaby close to the river where the soils are similar. And as long as those are the soils that they use, they're not too different from our soils. The big problem, of course, is the monitoring, and I really did like that monitoring system that we've referred in when this came to us before. We'll be supporting this, but I'm hoping we'll get a major report on rebuilding soils in Richmond when the report comes forward that staff is working on at the present. Because if we decide to adopt that report, then that puts everything else in perspective, and we'll know what to do in the future. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I had a question to staff. Is there any agricultural products that could be grown on the land the way it is right now?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, right now what the agrologists are saying is that there's no ability to grow any agricultural crop on the existing soil.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, so let's call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. Brings us to the last item that was referred to by the delegation. Coming out of General Purposes Committee, which recommended that a letter be written to the Solicitor General for the province of BC with copies to Richmond MLAs and the Premier, seeking a meeting as soon as possible to address the issue of undue regulation on the use of intersection cameras in public places and the images generated, including A, appropriate use of high-resolution images on such devices, including for the purposes of criminal investigation and prosecution, and B, judicial or other oversight on the use of the images to prevent misuse, and I would so move. So it's moved and seconded. We brought this forward to General Purposes Committee in the aftermath of the shooting at the airport, because we have a new traffic intersection set of cameras, 110 of them, and we want to push that number up. And lo and behold, the Privacy Commissioner has mandated that we cannot use high enough resolution on the images to identify people in the vehicles or the vehicles themselves. So what this does, you know, it's obvious. If that's a low resolution, you're not going to be able to use it in court as evidence of anything. It's just a car. Now, there's still, we have to keep in mind, there's still other uses for those cameras, but to me, this would be the best use, one of the most valuable uses of these cameras. And as was reflected in the delegation that we heard from tonight, under the end of this, under B, is judicial or other oversight on the use of images to prevent misuse. So, I mean, that's a big factor that we want to make sure that there is oversight, that the police aren't just using these images for the wrong purposes, or the city for that matter. So what it would be is that there will be some judicial review on the use of the images and to make sure that they are being used for their stated aim. Now, in a recent article, this was reported in the Penticton Herald on May 14th in the aftermath of one of these shootings. And it says, police have mounted an all-out joint effort to end the scourge of gang violence in Metro Vancouver that has seen deadly shootings in public places in recent weeks, British Columbia's Solicitor General says. Mike Farnworth said Friday, a day after meeting with top police officials, that they assured him they would use all available tools to end gang violence. And he says, they are absolutely committed to suppressing this cycle of violence. This is job number one. This is their top priority. And so we've spent, as a city, we've spent over $2 million on these traffic cameras. And yes, the images could be misused, and we have to guard against that to make sure that they are used properly. But I would suggest that what the Privacy Commissioner has done is to mandate the most effective use of those traffic cameras so that we can see who is shooting at the police, which did happen just a couple of weeks ago. And we've had a number of gang incidents in our city in the last couple months with the homicides and one thing and another. So surely it behooves us to meet with the Solicitor General to say, this is not appropriate. You need to be able to use these images in a form that can be used in court to prove who has perpetrated these violent acts and to put a stop to them. And as I just remind, it can't just be the willy-nilly giving out of these images or whatever. There has to be oversight on that. I fully acknowledge it. But with that kind of oversight, we can be perfectly safe. You know, mom and pop driving down the street aren't going to have their images used, but the gangsters will. And the ultimate irony, in my opinion, is that if you have a dash cam in the vicinity, whether you have whether it's on your car or you have a camera in a restaurant or a bank or other institution, you know, in a business, those images can be used without restriction. Yet I guess it's because it's government that installs these cameras. I guess they don't trust government, and they say you can't use them. I think it is a fundamental misunderstanding by the Privacy Commissioner, and to the extent the Solicitor General is involved. I think something needs to be done, and to me, this is step number one, if for no other reason than what I just quoted you from the Penticton newspaper. I have Councillor Day.
Well, I just, first of all, wanted to say that I agree. We need to have all the tools at our hands to deal with gang violence and increasing murders in Metro Vancouver. And I just want the public to know this is not a new thing. Council has been talking about this, in front and behind the scenes for years, even before we ordered those cameras. So we're well aware of the limitations. I don't disagree with writing the letter, but I think we have to ask ourselves as a council, are we trying to look like we're doing something, or do we want to actually do something? If you go on the federal website, there's a public consultation on modernization of the Privacy Act. And I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but the officer of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada is already starting the process to look to amend and to include federal restrictions, but they also want to have a definition of identification, so that basically where can we use the data and where can't we use the data. So while I support this, I feel very strongly that we need to add one more item to this motion, which is C, which that to amend it to include the federal authorities, including the Officer of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. This isn't a BC issue, it's a Canadian privacy issue. And we are cutting ourselves off at the knees if we don't take this to the next level. So I will want to make a motion that we include that as one of the recipients of this letter. Thank you very much.
I would just not hesitate to point out right now that what we're dealing with is the BC Privacy Commissioner. So, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the recommendation on the floor, and thanks for bringing this forward. As Council knows, we've been dealing with these cameras. I think we approved the funding in December of 2017 in the 2018 budget, and there was a really long process, and I think it was almost 2 years that it was with the OIPC, and we've complied with everything. But at the time, I don't think we ever thought we would be in the situation that we are in right now, the gang conflict, and the danger that our police and the public face with the gang conflict spilling out into the public arena. So I think absolutely there has to be oversight, but I think absolutely I think it's called exigent circumstances, we have to be able to use every tool available to help our police get to the bottom of this. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be speaking in opposition to the item that's on the agenda, as I did at General Purposes Committee. And I got a number of new points, as it was very fresh on my mind when I was discussing at General Purposes Committee, and I've seen some further clarification since then. But I remain opposed, and here's some of the reasons why. First off, I feel this could be referred back and go through the system that we have in place, which is the Community Safety Committee, and I think they could have a discussion at that level with the officer in charge and others as part of the community safety team. We haven't had any staff weigh in on this yet, and so that's one of the reasons why I attend all committee meetings, even though I'm on committee safety now. It would have been something I definitely would have discussed the week earlier at that meeting. Secondly, I just like at General Purposes, I can't comment fully on this. There is some information that Mayor and Council received, and so I can't get into any specifics that I do feel relate to this. I'm not calling for a closed discussion. I'm just stating that I can't speak fully to it at this time. Another reason is I feel there's a financial cost to this that we should be weighing at this moment. If we're going to ask for more work, then we should be also knowing what the budget item is going to come with that. We've just had this massive increase in funding, and to say that we can just do this without major funding changes, just think about the number of staffing and specialized security staffing that would be needed. And to go from the current level to high-res files, there's a lot of technology, a lot of space at City Hall for the servers to be kept and preserve those files for 30 days. And the energy demand that goes with keeping that room air-conditioned and all the servers working. And so the cost, I think, is something that hasn't been discussed and is not being considered at this point. Also, that this is to be taken on by our transportation department, and I really feel they specialize in transportation. And I'm not saying this should go to the RCMP as their role, because as the Privacy Commissioner said in their ruling, they didn't see it being appropriate unless there was cases like an abduction or something where they could immediately tap into the information. But beyond that, I think our transportation, as we hear, are already well covered across the city, doing projects and innovating design and planning. And to tack on this, I don't think at the higher level of camera footage and the capability that would come with that is a challenge for us. Another concern is the outside agencies can get access to video footage for a measly $375 plus tax if you make the request within 20 days. And I'm concerned we get a regular update at Community Safety Committee about sexual assaults, other violent incidents that might involve somebody's ex-partner or might involve a stalker, and to allow, I'm not saying that one of them would publicly say, I want access to footage and here's what I want to do with it, but they can go through other means to access footage from using a cover outside agency. Another point brought up by Councillor Day, we have YVR airport, we have port lands. If we wanted to deal with some of the drug trafficking or some of the shooting, we could put up cameras on these federal jurisdiction areas. We could do better surveying of what's coming in and out of these containers. We could do such a small percentage of actually inspecting of them. I also feel that I love technology. I use it clearly, but there are times where people get ahead of themselves and jump into it, and then find out consequences, some of the problems with it. And there's many young people who have learned the lesson the hard way when it comes to showing pictures or videos of themselves. I think we need more public debate before we ask for the privilege that would come along with this footage. I think there's ways we can keep the public safe and safer than going into mining data. You just have to search up some titles like social credit scores in China, or Skynet system, or police state, facial recognition at Richmond Center. There's a lot of things that really trigger the public in opposition, and I don't think they've had time to weigh in on the city. And my final comment, if I may, I've participated as a councillor in discussions with the previous provincial government and MLAs and the current government and MLAs, and I'm yet to be fully satisfied from the meeting, and albeit during the last one with the technology due to COVID, I was trying to speak and I couldn't even get my voice heard by anyone else on the call. So I don't feel that having this meeting is going to get what we want. We have a privacy commission in place, and I think we need to respect its previous ruling. So thank you very much.
Councillor Al, now I'll turn off here. Okay, go ahead.
Your Worship, I'm going to support this motion because I think this is very important for the safety of our public. When I talk to people and inform that we spend millions of dollars on these cameras, and yet the images that we are allowed to use would be so blurred that they are not useful at all, even in all kinds of cases. And I think there's a need for us to use those images for justifiable reasons. And actually, we are not asking for any kind of loosening up of the requirements for the control of the use. Actually, we are only asking to improve the resolutions, that when we need to use the images, or there are people who have the legitimate reason to use the images, they become usable. I don't want to regret that, when we need those images, and because they are so low resolution, that we cannot use them. And we have been always asking for the Privacy Commissioner to allow us to use high resolution, because we know that YVR can be a target of terrorist attack. And the violence that happened a few weeks ago at the airport was not terrorist in nature. However, that is an example that things can happen in our airport. And I think we need to have the images and also the technology to track or to trace the people who are running away from the airport. So I think if we don't have resolutions that are useful, then why spend the money on it? So I think it's only reasonable for us to ask for higher resolution permission. And I am 100% or even 110% in support of, yes, you need to have very tight control, oversight of the use of this information. I understand the worries of the infringement of privacy. However, I think we have to wait between public safety and privacy. And I'm confident that we can have very tight control of the use and minimized. If not, we cannot eliminate any misuse. So with that, I will support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Liu?
Thank you, Worship. I too will be supporting tonight's resolution. We've all seen the level of gang violence go up. We've seen lots of other things happen. We've seen break-ins to businesses. We've seen other things that make people feel unsafe in Richmond, in their community. And, we invested in our cameras, and we want to be able to use them. It seems to me that these cameras already work. So we recently acquired them. We didn't buy them in the 1980s. So they actually have the resolution. It's just that we're not able to store them at the resolution that we're taking the footage at, if I'm correct. If I'm wrong, maybe staff can correct me on this. But so we water it down to save it in that blurred vision. We didn't buy crappy cameras that don't work. So we don't have to buy new cameras. We already have cameras that work. They do the job. If I was sexually assaulted, I'd sure want the police to have access to that footage and to bring the criminal to justice and to protect the next person, the next woman, the next young girl from that criminal lowlife. I'd sure want that to happen. And it seems to me that, yeah, we've got, police are able to get access someone else's dash cam, your footage, but they can't use our traffic cameras. Our traffic cameras are fixed, so you know where they are. So it's not like they're following you around and they're on somebody's body armor, of a police body armor. They're fixed. It seems strange to me too, that wasn't it just last week or a week and a half ago that the police put out the photos, the names, and the ages of known gangsters. That hadn't necessarily, is that a crime to be a known gangster? So they put out those names. Where was the Privacy Commission on that? But we can't use our own fixed cameras. And so it seems to me that we need to be able to use our own equipment to fight crime here in Richmond.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting of this. Interesting, the discussion around the table. You know, when we went into this a number of years ago, those on council, we bought these in good faith to be a deterrent to crime. You know, we can't put any price on public safety. And what's the value of a life? You know, we're talking about what we can't do. We have to read what we're putting them and what we are going to request. You know, I think it's critical right now. And times have changed and circumstances are changing daily. And we have a war in the Lower Mainland. And, you know, we're arguing whether we're going to go and ask the Solicitor General, who's pledged to do everything in his power to combat this and provide a vehicle to help rid the Lower Mainland and province of a very, very unsavory issue. And it's timely that we're putting it forward, Your Worship. And yes, we're doing something. You know, we're a community that's doing something. Not every community has bought cameras for public safety. And that's the thing. And when you look at what we're going to use them for and what we're asking for, I think we are supporting and we're acting now. And because there is a contradiction of use of cameras and video devices on it, I think everybody's making the argument. I think that we need to put this forward. As the delegation said, Mr. Hobbs said, well, maybe we'll only get a discussion, but we will get it moving in the right direction. To me, this is extremely important as chair of community safety. And every member of council should be thinking of, you know, we've had violent incidences. We had people doing high speed, and you know what? They shot at a police officer. They discharged their firearms. They weren't shooting at each other. They were shooting at somebody to not follow them along the way. That's right on the video camera. It's been on every newscast for weeks and weeks. And I think we have to put this forward on behalf of community safety, Your Worship. The value of life is too great. I'm looking at it in a criminal act of the purpose of criminal investigations and prosecution. It's right there in writing. We can iron out those things that the provincial government, and you're right, it is a provincial matter. They will tell us how they can be used or whatever, and we'll continue. And I think Councillor Liu expressed very succinctly an incident, and I agree with her 100%. So I think we've got to do this. We have 110 of them. It's going to make neighborhoods safe. It's going to make our people feel safe, and it's going to hopefully give some results so that the RCMP have something to back themselves up. And I hope it'll be a deterrent as well for any crime in the community. So, Your Worship, the sooner we get on with it and get this meeting, the better it'll be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steves.
Thank you. I supported this at the committee level, but since that time I've given a lot of thought, and I'm going to join Councillor Wolf in opposition. What we should be doing first is to have the great debate on how much privacy we want to give up. If this was going forward 10 or 15 years ago, we wouldn't even consider it. If you recall a few years back, just the idea of cameras watching traffic flow and watching for speeders had such a tremendous outcry all across the province that the BC government that was going to do it stepped back and didn't. And we came in right after with these cameras and did one or two, and nobody noticed they were there. But we're now looking at having cameras literally everywhere. I mean, we've got 100 or so of them. We're looking at cameras everywhere. And we've got dash cams on cars. We've got cameras in every business or many businesses. People have cameras in their homes. Wherever we go now, we're being watched. And I think that while it may take time to analyze what's on those cameras, the next step will simply computerize them. And a computer in a few seconds will be able to watch every one of those cameras that are on street corners and know exactly who's there and where they're going and what's happening. I'm not so sure we want to have a society like that where everywhere you go you're being watched. So I think that we need to have that debate first, and then decide whether we want to use our cameras for that or not. The car that was chased by the RCMP, it was on their dash cams, it was on other dash cams, we've seen it on TV. They didn't need our cameras to know it was going, whichever streets they were going down, we saw it. They gave up because they were being shot at, and it got away. Most cases, the cars are stolen, and it doesn't make any difference whether you got the license plate or not, because if they get away, they're going to pull off on a side street someplace and set it on fire. And we know that's happened a half a dozen times in the last month. So I don't see the cameras are going to do that much good, and they could do a lot of harm. So I will not be supporting it.
Councillor Day.
So I have an motion to amend to add a C, which is to add also right to the officer of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada.
Yes, is that it?
Yeah, and to speak to that, if you go on the federal website, the Commissioner Daniel Thurin.
No. What is your motion to amend?
I'll repeat it. Once again, I would like to add a C underneath B that says that we're also right to the officer of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada.
All right, is there a seconder for that? There is Councillor Wolf has seconded it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. So I appreciate that. So the Privacy Commissioner, Daniel Thurin, wrote to the Minister, I strongly support the Department of Justice objective of modernizing Canada's long outdated federal privacy laws. It hasn't been updated since 1983. And I agree with Councillors Wolf and Steves that we're not the experts here. The federal government is the one who ultimately sets the laws for the commissioner, because ultimately we follow the federal laws of Canada. And I'm not in a position to say I'm an expert on the use or not use of the information. But I mean, it makes sense to me, but I'm not the expert. I'm first to admit that. So let's get this right. Send the letter to the appropriate authorities, and then we'll find out where we're at.
Well, first of all, the motion does not refer to the Privacy Commissioner of BC. Okay? So you're suggesting we send it to the Privacy Commissioner for Canada without sending it to the Privacy Commissioner for BC. So maybe you could take a look at what the wording to see what is included. With that,
so if it goes Solicitor General of BC, it doesn't also go to the Privacy Commissioner? I would have assumed that would have been hand in hand.
I have no idea. We'll see. All right. The motion is to speak to the Solicitor General and the Premier and the local MLAs. On the motion to amend to send something to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, all those in favor? Sorry, I can't see. I see Councillor. Okay. And those opposed? If I can see. Okay. So that fails with the Mayor, Councillor Au, McPhail, McNulty, and Liu opposed. So I'm going to bring this to a head and call the question, but just before I do, I just have to say, we're talking about something with judicial oversight to protect people in our community. to protect the police who are being shot at and protect other people in our community. That's what this is about. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillors Steves and Wolf opposed. Brings us to public announcements and events. I think we all know that we've got a by-election May 29th on this Saturday. Everybody's encouraged to cast their ballot if they haven't already done so. 10 polling stations, and they're open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Now you can still register for a mail ballot. This allows you to avoid lineups on voting day by dropping your completed envelope to the drop box at Richmond City Hall or at a voting place on Saturday. So if you want more information on the candidates and how to get a mail ballot, all that stuff, where the polling places are, go to richmond.ca/election services. We also have Seniors Week from June 7th to 13th. Over 20 online and phone activities are available this year to help seniors and their families stay connected and engaged. So again, go online to the Richmond website if you want more information. We have the Community Better Challenge, the Participation. Once again, our city is participating in the annual Community Better Challenge from June 1st to the 30th. The challenge is a nationwide initiative to encourage communities to sit less and move more. The goal is to engage families, friends, neighbors, and others to get active and track their physical activity through a mobile app. So go to the Richmond website and you'll find out more information on that. Then we have Doors Open Richmond. The 14th annual Doors Open Richmond is going to again be held online this year from the 5th to the 12th. During the week-long program, new videos and behind-the-scenes content from more than 30 partner sites will be featured on social media and the Richmond Museum's website. Each site represents a unique aspect of Richmond's rich and storied heritage by taking you inside local places of worship, cultural and civic centers, businesses, museums, and heritage sites. So go to richmond.ca/doorsopen. And finally, remember to register for your COVID-19 vaccination. We're doing pretty well. They opened up some stuff today. We've still got a long way to go. So to improve access, we've got a couple new clinics in Richmond at Cambie Secondary. Clinics are still available at the River Rock Casino in Kwantlen University. So go online if you want to get vaccinated or give them a call. So Madam Clerk, bylaws for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 3 bylaws with no noted opposition at second and third reading. I should note that the first bylaw, the address noted on the agenda, should be corrected to 10011 Seacoat Road.
Okay, move the first 2.
Not the third?
Oh, sorry, I'll move all 3.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's moved.
Thank you.
And seconded. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you very much, through your worship. Just a question to staff. So I'm the only one on council who wasn't here when the first item with the corrected address on Seacoat Road was previously discussed. So I just had one comment and question to this. So I go by this route a lot. It's there's no page number because it's in my extra package here that no one else has in front of them. But if you look at the map, there was actually in your package, there's kind of a map of the area. So you can kind of get the idea here. Oh, I lost it. There's page 357. You can see the kind of the general map. But on my page, again, you don't have this. There's no page number. It's attachment 5. It shows the 2 houses. And my question is about staff working with the corner property. So in this case, I think it's called proposed lot B, is adjacent to Seacoat Road. In the corner of Williams and Seacoat, it's already a very busy corner for children walking to McNair Secondary or just a cyclist down Williams or further down on Seacoast at the elementary school there at Woodward. And so my question was, could we not do something to ensure we have a site triangle? I'm not sure if the city had never seen us use that term, but at that corner, other municipalities kind of have a 6 meter in, 6 meter down, and they make a triangle, and they try not to have landscaping, giant masonry fences, and other stuff right up to that corner, which blocks the view of children and cyclists and everything else. And I see that these two houses are being proposed to start at the same frontage. Just down the road, we allowed one to be backed up, setback, to allow the tree to retain. Is there not efforts being made to push this back further? So that was my only question. Thanks.
Mr. Craig, can we impose more restrictions at this point? This is for adoption after all.
Through your worship, at this point in time, council would not be able to impose additional restrictions. Having said that, in response to Councillor Wolf's question, the city does already have a bylaw that requires sightlines be maintained at corner lots such as this. So I believe it is the city's vehicle access bylaw. I'm not positive on the actual bylaw number, but there is already a bylaw in place that does require buildings be set back at corners, that there not be hedges installed, etc. I would be happy to provide that information to Councillor Wolf via email.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. If I could have that information and to help our neighborhood networks ensure that they have the sightlines as described there. So thank you very much.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Madam Clerk, Development Permit Panel.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two recommendations for Council's consideration. Recommendation 1, that the minutes of the Development Permit Panel meeting held on May 12th and the Chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on January 15th, 2020 and January 13th, 2021 be received for information. And Recommendation 2, that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of a development permit for the property located at 5660 Parkwood Way and a development permit for the property located at 9571, 9591, 9611, 96711 Stevenson Highway and 10831 Southdale Road be endorsed and the permits so issued.
All right. So that's moved and seconded. Councillor McPhail. You're muted, Linda. Councillor McPhail, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. On our Council 368, in regards to 5660 Parkwood Way, in the last paragraph, it talks about how this project will have roof-mounted solar panels. And I know that we have a referral on solar panels and that we'll be getting a report later this year. So I'm just wondering if the data from this project, like how the application of the solar panels, the costs, etc., if we're collecting that information, because I think that was part of the referral at the time, was collecting information on projects that could be used to, see what incentives are needed or those types of things.
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, yes, we did speak to the applicant about getting access to that data. So we don't have a formal legal agreement with them to do so. However, we did discuss this application with them, with our sustainability folks in the context of that referral.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Councillor Steves.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I was going to ask the same question. I noticed in the report that they say that it'll reduce their power usage at some parts of the time about 10%, other times that maybe even more. I think it'd be good to know exactly what percentage they are able to reduce it as this project goes ahead. The other aspects of it, however, I like the changes that were made. We were talking at the time about intensifying industrial lands, and they've effectively gone up 3 stories when most industrial places, even car lots, I'd like to have everything in one story. As a great design for the building, and I think it's one that we can use as an example of where we want to go in the future. So I'm really pleased with this one. And it'd be good to know, of course, they're using the rooftop for other things than solar, so they probably don't have enough room to do more solar. Might be interested in knowing how much rooftop is used for solar and how much is used for other purposes, and other area on the roof that could take solar. But certainly, I'm looking forward to see the construction of this building, because I think it's a step towards the future.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And someone make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We are now adjourned.